What's up, guys? Connor O'Hanlon here for another episode of the Greater Society podcast. And today, as usual, we have a lot of clips, a lot of lunacy to respond to, with the last week being Cpac, the annual gathering of some of the most notorious and infamous uh, right wingers, if I'm trying to be nice, in the country. And actually, as we will see, not just from this country, from abroad as well. We're going to take a look at some of the speeches specifically from Donald Trump, and as you probably have seen in the thumbnail, as a continuation of our discussion that we had last week about Michael Knowles from the Daily Wire calling for the eradication of transgenderism. That will be a major discussion today, and as it will be moving forward, because these lunatics want to keep attacking people that are just trying to live their lives. And then we're going to talk about Marianne Williamson running for president, my take on it. That will be probably pretty straightforward, I think. Then we're going to respond to Russell Brand's appearance on Bill Maher's program last Friday, which kind of isn't going to be an annoying discussion because I used to be like, I don't know that I would consider myself a fan of Bill Maher, but I liked his show. I really enjoyed the show. I used to love watching Killer Mike, Bernie Sanders, even just like more, people I disagreed with, but more from the center, just to see different opinions going at each other and kind of just battling it out. I think that those shows don't exist on mainstream media. I would love for this platform to somehow grow into that at some point, bring some differing opinions and whatnot on to kind of brawl it out. And in between all of that, there will be, of course, the mishmash of random right-wing stuff that we will be engaging and responding, reacting, and debunking to. So with that being said, I'm going to start off today with something that a classmate of mine, Jameer, sent me. This is a blind watch, and this is why we're going to do it up front, because for all I know, this could be a flop on my end, my reaction to this, but he wanted my take on this video. And I said, of course I'll watch this video. I'll watch it on the stream and give my take on it. And I saw that it was Elizabeth Warren, and I was like, all right, we'll see what this is. So 100%, this is a blind watch of this clip. It's from TikTok. So I think the second I pull it up, it's going to start playing. But I think this is an interesting way to do this blind go at it. I think it's maybe a potential segment that we could do here and there when we just have blind takes, but as long as it's within reason, and I won't get banned or demonetized for some, well, not demonetized, I'm not monetized, but banned or removed or any of that stuff for this. But on that topic, real quick, I threw it in the chat, but while you're here, help us grow the channel by subscribing, hitting the button down below, hitting the thumbs up while you're doing it, hitting like. I know it's a little thing, it seems stupid. It really helps small channels like us grow. So with that being said, let us dive into this clip. Let me see if I can make this. I don't know if I can make this full screen, so I'm just gonna, oh, nope, it's not. Oh, that'll probably do. So this will be, it looks like not Colin Powell, the guy, the chairman of the Fed, I believe getting interviewed and grilled by Elizabeth Warren.
Will continue raising interest rates as you plan. Unemployment will be 4.6% by the end of the year.
It's not an intended consequence.
Well, but it is, and it's in your report.
So just to reiterate, because I was talking over that, Elizabeth Warren talking to Jerome Powell, who's the chairman of the Federal Reserve, which is if you go back, this is why Jameer sent this to me. If you go back a couple weeks ago, we talked about the concept of modern monetary theory as it applies specifically to the United States. Inflation and unemployment are impacted by the Fed, by their interest rates hikes and, in theory, cuts. And as we have seen lately, the Fed has continuously been raising interest rates. Now, what Elizabeth Warren here is talking about, as I'm probably sure she'll talk about here in a second, is that there is an inverse relationship between a somewhat inverse relationship between unemployment and inflation. They are two pieces of a very complex, in some fashion, equation. As inflation goes up, in theory, a reason, not the reason necessarily, but a reason that could happen is by increases in wages. Now, that is not what, as we've talked about, has been going on here in the United States. Wages have slightly gone up. Real wages actually slightly have gone up. But the real impact here is supply chains. As an accountant, I can tell you too, when we talk to clients, it's not that there's issues of demand, it's issues of supply. Okay? So let's see what else Elizabeth Warren has to say here.
Report, and that would be about 2 million people. If you could speak directly to the 2 million who you're planning.
So the way that they come up with these numbers too is specifically from usually I should say, the Congressional Budget Office, which will look at how different policy changes will impact, employment, inflation, the budget, all these different aspects of the economy. Now, I have to assume that's where these numbers are coming from. I don't know this full context of this, but if Elizabeth Warren is saying 2 million, it's probably from a CBO score or some sort of score that measures the interest rate hikes. Now, again, as I was saying, it's inverse. So as the inflation will go up, technically there should be a maybe not equal and opposite reaction, but a reaction on the employment side. The way that the Federal Reserve is trying to control inflation is by raising interest rates. And if you raise interest rates, businesses will have a harder time borrowing money. They borrow money from banks. Banks can technically borrow money from the Fed, or they get it through deposits, right? So all this is to say is if a business can't get funding, they are more likely to not be able to pay for new employees, for new machinery, for new rent, or you know what I mean by that, new real estate. I'm sorry, but all this is to say, when you raise the interest rate, the goal is to curb inflation by punishing labor and increasing the unemployment rate. That is how you curb inflation. It's inverse. So as unemployment rises, the inflation rate would technically go down. Now, just while we're on this topic, the concept of stagflation, which is what happened in the 1970s, is where unemployment rises while inflation rises as well. That is a major, major economic disaster. So if that happens, you're in trouble. But that is not where we're at right now. Unemployment, for those who maybe haven't listened to previous episodes, is at a record low, a near 50-year record low. And we'll talk more about some of that stuff throughout the episode, I'm sure. But the point being is, if unemployment is so low, as I'll tell a quick anecdote before we finish this clip. Talking to an older employer, or an older, not someone I work with, but somebody that works in the field, was talking about how younger people don't want to work. And I am puzzled by the continued perpetuation of this notion where young people don't want to work. Because it's not that young people don't want to work, it's that young people refuse to accept the working conditions for the pay that is being offered. We have a 3.6% unemployment rate, which means that most adult working, capable working adults are in the workforce. And for those who aren't, to be considered unemployed, you have to be looking for employment. That also is compounded by the fact that the person I was talking to I won't say like what they do because, not fair, but it's talking about younger people not wanting to work and then talking about, wages in the teens, you know, $12, $13 an hour. And I'm like, I'm biting my tongue because like I'm not looking for an argument. I'll argue on here, but $15 an hour, which is like what the average progressive, I mean, even at this point, the average Democrat is pushing for, is in the mid $30,000 pre-tax per year. So you can't afford a house, you can't afford a car, you can't afford childcare, you can't afford to do all the things that a normal working adult would need to do to be a part of a functional society, but they are expected to just take it and to be happy for this wage. And that's where this disconnect is consistently hammered. And this notion here is a disregard for the pain and suffering that unemployment will lead to.
To get fired over the next year, what would you say to them?
Inflation is extremely high, and it's hurting the working people of this country badly, all of them, not just 2 million of them. And we are taking the only measures we have to bring inflation down.
And putting 2 million people out of work is just part of the cost, and they just have to bear it?
Will working people be better off?
So I see burner account in the in the chat. So this was, of course, your video. So I want to respond to what you say in the chat. For those listening, you don't see the chat. It says, corporations don't pay because workers aren't loyal, but workers aren't loyal because corporations don't pay. Now, the idea of a loyal employee, that concept is not novel. That is something that older generations worked one job, one position. They got out of school, high school probably. They got to the factory, they got to the office, and then that was their job. They got promoted, they made more money, they progressed, they lived the American dream for the most part. Now, again, that's not the case for everybody, and that's definitely not the case for different marginalized groups throughout history. But the concept of a loyal corporation is nonsense. There has never been a corporation, and specifically in today's society, where they will put loyalty to an employee over the profits of the company. Because as a corporation, their fiduciary duty is to the shareholders of the company. AKA, they don't care about this. This is where, when I think about future campaigns, this is the crux of a campaign right here. A politician that runs on stakeholders over shareholders is going to be a monumental concept, because shareholders care about only creating profits. Stakeholders care about the community, the environment, while also considering profits in conjunction with working conditions, work-life balance, all of these things. That's what a stakeholder first economy would look like. And yes, the we are a family concept is a way to manufacture a level of consent with employees to say, yeah, like I feel welcome here. I feel this and that. And look, there are good employers. That is not to say that employers are bad, but it is to say that corporations have a fiduciary duty to make money, and that is their priority. So when we talk about this in the abstract, we have to look at it as they're going to brand themselves as a family. I mean, look, I'll use jobs that I didn't take. I've been interviewed by companies where they say we're like a family, but that we're like a family is a branding exercise. It is not reality. I've talked to people that worked at jobs that I didn't take, and they're like, yeah, like I'm working like 70 hours a week. And I mean, this is the accounting field, but like, look, that is branding. There's nothing more to that than branding. I mean, even when you work at a small company, like I'll put it this way, as we talked about in the chat too, talking about apartments, the way that you create somebody to have an investment in a company, the way that you create loyalty and this is going to sound radical to some, is the same notion that you would create an investment in a apartment or a house. A renter has no equity in an apartment or a house. A renter lives in the house, lives in the apartment, they pay their money, they expect the landlord to keep up with stuff, right? But when you as an individual own real estate, when you own the apartment, when you own the home, you have an investment in that home, in that apartment, not just in the saying that I want the property value to stay up, but I want to live in a house that I can do what I want. I will spend my money the way that I see fit and improve the house, improve the abode, we'll just say more broadly. It's the same thing with a company. Now, this is where it sounds radical when we talk about this. This is something that, in the abstract could be labeled as, oh, this is socialism, this is this and that and the other thing, but it's not. It's really common sense. If you provide, and it doesn't have to be equal equity, but if you provide employees with equity in the company that they work for, they're going to be more invested, quite literally invested in the company that they work for. They care about the long-term success of the company because it's what depends, their investment depends on their time, energy, money spent in a efficient manner. Versus if you're coerced or, like I said, the manufactured consent of being and forced to be somewhere with no investment other than here's your salary, a lot harder of a sell to say, I'm going to sacrifice seeing my kids or, even just going to see that movie or being a part of my community. And a good employer would recognize some level of that and say, we're going to find this balance. But in modern society, I mean, this is a major tangent from what I planned on starting off with today. But I find it interesting. It's an interesting conversation to have. And that level of investment in ownership and in equity is key. Let's see what Jerome Powell has to say here, though.
Off if we just walk away from our jobs and inflation remains 5-6%. It's not as black and white as very
Just
very
looking
infrequent.
at the numbers, it actually is pretty black
Alan
and white.
Blinder's written a book on this, and
There have been 12 times that we've seen a 1-point increase in the unemployment rate in a year. How many times did the economy fail to fall into a recession after doing that? Out of 12 times.
I think the number is 0.
I think the number is 0. That's exactly right.
Right now, the unemployment rate is 3.4%, which is the lowest in 54 years. And we actually don't think that we need to see a sharp or enormous increase in unemployment to get inflation under control. Even 4.5% unemployment is well better than most of the time for the last 75 years.
So that's that. That's my take on it. There are certainly issues. I mean, I would definitely push back and saying, like, look, I believe in a jobs guarantee. I think that having public option for certain jobs as well is useful, and in creating an opportunity for people to work, to make a living wage, to have healthcare, all of these things that shouldn't be necessarily tied to working for a profitable, gigantic corporation that their only goal is to make money. So that's my take on it. I hope that was a great opening, but yeah, so your teacher's wrong. So the teacher in high school says, this is in chat, that not the teacher, this is a comment in chat saying, my teacher told me in high school the economy will tank every 10 years no matter what. Now, here's the counter to that. The business cycle is something that is proposed as natural within capitalism. Now, I'll push back and say, if you look at the response in the Great Recession and the Obama administration through the Trump 4 years, honestly, up until COVID, it was the slowest growing economy in response to a recession in American history. However, it was the longest sustained growth in the history of the United States as well. Now that goes, again, I use the example of saying both Obama and Trump because they have vastly different policies, but in the end, that is a slower, more Keynesian, more deficit spending than the previous administrations had been. So you can look at it as, yeah, it could tank every 10 years. That's the theory of the business cycle. It's not exactly 10 years. It's roughly 10 years. It's, 7 to 10 years. But if we keep investing in certain ways, we provide jobs for people, the recession, and even if that was the case, like, let's just say that capitalism intrinsically has this recessionary period every 10 years. If we do what I just said, the impacts of the recession would be lessened. The impacts of unemployment would be lessened. People would have savings. People would have the ability to retire. People would have the ability to have health care without worrying that they got laid off. I mean, there's these things that are tied to employment, which is, stupid in my opinion. With all that being said, let us dive into the craziness that had happened over the last week at Cpac. Now, for those who are maybe unaware, Cpac is an annual conference that is for conservative folks in America. The first video I'm going to show you here is, I don't even know that I really need sound. I'll show it to you with sound, but this is, on the left, Matt Schlapp, who is credibly accused of groping, and there is some verbiage that I don't want to act like I know the quote from, but Google Matt Schlapp sexual assault and you will find it, regarding a Herschel Walker staffer. This is insane, and Matt Schlapp, of course, being one of these America First, anti-gay, anti-trans Republicans. I failed to mention, maybe didn't fail to mention, I was leading up to this part, which this doesn't make it any better. It actually, it doesn't make it better or worse for that matter, but the person that he's credibly accused of groping is a man. So these people that are vehemently anti-gay, that are pushing for legislations that punish gay people, punish trans people, go after the most marginalized people in our communities, this jerk-off is abusing people and doing it in a hypocritical way, which shouldn't be a surprise to anybody. But here we go. Here is Matt Schlapp talking to Jim Jordan.
Chatter in the media about who's here and not here. I'm really proud to be standing alongside someone I think might just be the most powerful man in Washington, D.C.
So I'll pause it here. I'll take them off screen now. But here's the funny part. And it's not funny, actually, but it's ironic. The first and opening speech of Cpac is the chair of Matt Schlapp and Congressman Jim Jordan. Matt Schlapp accused of sexual assault. Jim Jordan is famously a assault enabler, as he ignored the players, or I should say the wrestlers at Ohio State when they were being abused by a doctor. So this is a great opening to Cpac, and this is why I call it just blatant lunacy, is because the first thing that happens is they bring out Matt Schlapp and Jim Jordan. Now, let's see what we want to do next. Here we have, and this is, I'm sorry if this is music's loud. Here we have, I would love to see you guys take a guess. If you have a foreign leader that is going to be showing up at Cpac and he's going to be cheered on, who would it be? And we obviously know it wasn't Putin, but that could have been probably a legitimate guess if, you you know Cpac and the people that are there. But while you might be throwing your guesses in chat or you're yelling at me while you're driving to work, let's just take a little gander at, and I'm gonna lower the volume because I'm sure that this music is gonna be too loud, but that is so loud. I actually lowered the music. You can see it if you're watching. I lowered the music so low, and it was still blasting. All right, so for those at home just listening, if your guess was Jair Bolsonaro, you were right. Bolsonaro, of course, being the wannabe dictator of Brazil, who was, beaten fair and square by Lula da Silva in the election last year. Now he basically just seems to be living in Florida after his supporters stormed the Capitol in Brasilia. And, he's celebrated and welcomed at Cpac, because of course he is. Of course he is. So these are two little interesting notes here. Now, let's go to... Let us go to... I don't want to go to the big dog, Trumpy, yet. Let us go to this totally not fascist, totally normal reaction after a speech that you give by failed governor candidate Kari Lake. Here you have her. I don't think there's any sound to it. I mean, there's sound, but there's no relevant sound. Here you go. There's a picture of Ronald Reagan, very small. Reagan's small now. Very small. Trump, very big. They say he's very big. Up goes... Oh, Reagan's even bigger over there. Wow. So, for those just listening, Kari Lake walks up to the picture of Donald Trump and gives him a kiss. Now, I'll say this. Before we go into some of Trump's speech here, Cpac does a poll. Cpac does a straw poll of the people at the convention to see who they want to be the president, who they want to be the vice president. Now, this may be surprising to you. It's not surprising to me. It's probably not surprising to you either, especially if you've been listening to the last couple of episodes. But Trump took this straw poll and won it handedly. Now, I should say that Ron DeSanctimonious was not at Cpac. He didn't speak. He was, doing a tour in his high-heeled boots around some other place. Maybe he was in Iowa, I don't know. He is going to end up probably running, but he's not running right now. So as of this, Trump was the major, headliner. And Trump beat DeSantis in the straw poll by 40 points. It wasn't even close. Trump was in the 60s and Meatball was in the 20s. Following DeSantis was Nikki Haley with about 5 or 6%. You had Kari Lake in the mix there as well, around the same percentage. But when it came to vice president, which a report came out, I believe, yesterday, talking about Trump is considering 4 different women for his vice presidential pick. Well, number 1 on the list, supposedly, is Kari Lake, who won the straw poll for being vice presidential pick at Cpac. Now, Kari Lake is a extremely far-right lunatic who is claiming that not only was the election not fair, but she actually believes that the machines were tampered with and that the election was stolen from her, which is there's absolutely no evidence of, to be clear. The other prominent people to note from this vice presidential straw poll is there's the governor of South Dakota. I forget her name. So she's not the same level of prominence. I'll just say that. That Carrie Lake has. And then there is Nikki Haley, who of course is running against Trump at this point. He doesn't feel that she is a legitimate threat, but we'll see about that. Maybe things change. And then the last one is Sarah Huckabee Sanders, who was Donald Trump's press secretary during his presidency. Now, any of those are disastrous picks. We can't possibly risk losing to them. And we're going to take a listen to what Trump had to say at Cpac to further cement why he cannot win in 2024 for our sake and for everybody else's sake. So let's start with this one, where we have Trump talking about we're never going back to the party of Jeb and loser Paul Ryan. He's probably quiet, so.
But we are never going back to the party of Paul Ryan, Karl Rove, and Jeb Bush.
So it's an interesting, the reason why I play this clip is because it's interesting to note that, again, they are at Cpac, a conservative conference, and all three of those people that he just named are or were prominent Republicans. Now, there's another clip of him talking about Mitch McConnell, and again, Mitch McConnell getting dunked on in the speech, which, like, I'm here for, but we have to, and the next clip I'm going to show you too, like, I'm here for this critique, but we have to remember the messenger here. We have to note that, like, he's going after the Republicans right now because they're all trying to bring him down. And that's the one thing that he's good at, is just swatting these people away like flies, because the Republicans kind of bow down in the end to, you know, the quote most alpha, which Trump is no alpha, but he's a bully and he's pretty good at it. So, you know, getting him on the debate stage with Ron DeSanctimonious or with Little Marco, or, you know, I'm sure that there's plenty of nicknames coming, but that's his strength. You know, it's not policy. It's not wonkery in any sort. It's not actually caring about the middle class. It's just strongman stuff. And I don't mean like physically strong. I mean fascist strongman. But I'll show you this other clip, which is, I think, a little bit more interesting. This is a clip where Trump does not actually call out one of the floated nicknames for Ron DeSantis was Tiny D, by the way. So if I call him that, that's why. But this is Trump not directly calling out Ron, but essentially really calling him out directly.
When we started this journey, a journey like there has never been before.
Never been before. Nope, of course not.
We had a Republican Party that was ruled by freaks, neocons, globalists, open border zealots, and fools. But we are never going back to...
Let's also remember that, like, the Republican Party that he's referring to is the party that created the space for him to operate in. This is why I get so angry about the Lincoln Project. This is why I get so angry about the whitewashing of, like, George W. Bush, or even like the Ronald Reagan and George H.W. Bush. Like, no, like, these guys are responsible for some of the most heinous things in American history. You're whitewashing them. And they created the pathway to Trump. I haven't talked about this pipeline in a little bit, but it goes directly from Nixon to Trump. There is no question about it. So it's funny to hear Trump critiquing this old Republican Party while he was a major donor to the Republican Party. And he's about to talk about Social Security. He tried to cut Social Security and Medicare in his administration, but failed. He tried to do it, but I'll come back to why I support this here, but I support this pinning of this to Ron DeSantis, but Trump tried to cut it too.
The party of Paul Ryan, Karl Rove, and Jeb Bush. We're not going back to people that want to destroy our great social security system.
You know Social Security? You know Social Security? It's great. We all love it. You guys in the crowd, you might not have it. Because of people like me, we don't want to expand it. But we all know it. We all love it. Medicare, you might not get it. Just because people like me.
I wonder who that might be. That want to raise the minimum age of Social Security to 70, 75, or even 80 in some cases.
Yeah, maybe even 80.
And that are out to cut Medicare to a level that it will no longer be recognizable. And when that was their original thought, that's what they always come back.
So this is the level of populism. And I say populism loosely because right-wing populism ultimately mixed with nationalism is fascism. So I know that that's a lot of isms thrown at you really quickly, but this level, populism can be good and populism can be bad. You know, I consider myself a populist, on the left, which is a very different aspect and ideological perspective than Trump. But him attacking Ron DeSantis on cutting Social Security and Medicare is good for people like us because I don't know about you, but I believe in expanding Social Security and expanding Medicare, not just keeping it where it is. So if the Republican position is just keep it where it is, I'm good with that. It's kind of the same thing that we talked about when Biden pinned people down at the State of the Union on Social Security and Medicare and said, oh, you guys don't want to cut it? Thanks for letting me know. Publicly stating that we can't cut it then. But the sinister part of this is that behind the scenes, no matter what we talk about, no matter what we do, the Republicans will say one thing in public and then privately they will try to cut Social Security, more specifically privatize Medicare, because that is what their whole goal has been. That's what their ideological goal is. So he can keep going after DeSantis on this. The way that we protect Social Security in 2024 is to expand the Democratic majority in the Senate, to win back the House, and to re-elect Joe Biden or to elect whoever the Democratic candidate is or president. And that's how you protect Social Security, because then you can have a legitimate tax reform, because we will talk about this ad nauseum for the next couple of years, that could actually fund Social Security and Medicare for our generation. And I say our generation, I mean millennials and Gen Z. So let's go to the last Trump clip before we go into the most heinous part of Cpac. Here you go. This is Trump's closing remark. And tell me that this doesn't sound dictatorial.
And if you put me back in the White House, their reign is over. Their reign will be over. And they know it. And America will be a free nation once again. We're not a free nation right now. We don't have free press. We don't have free anything.
We don't have free press, of course. They're writing fake news. They removed me from Twitter, but they put me back on Twitter. Thanks, Elon, but it's not free. You have to pay to get the blue check mark now. It's not free. Not free at all.
In 2016, I declared, I am your voice. Today, I add, I am your warrior. I am your justice. And for those who have been wronged and betrayed, I am your retribution. I am your retribution. Not going to let this happen. Not going to let it happen.
I am your retribution. Which is, again, this is where the fasci starts to show itself.
I will totally obliterate the deep state. I will fire
I'm curious about this. I mean, like, obviously, you can just say anything when you're campaigning, but like, if that's the case, if 4 more years of Trump could completely obliterate the deep state, why didn't he do that in his first 4 years? Why didn't his first 4 years completely obliterate this deep state? And then he, would have won re-election in his theoretical world. And then in 4 years of the Trump state or whatever it is, like this free enterprise and laissez-faire capitalism that is perfect for everybody, and we're going to be thriving, and trickle-down economics will work, which it never has, by the way, but it'll work this time. I don't mean to be a jerk, but like, how gullible do you have to be to believe that? Like, the deep state that he's referring to, 1, doesn't exist, but 2, if it did, how would he take it down so fast if he could have had the opportunity to for 4 years? So, and then of course ending with the USA chant, which in isolation wouldn't be necessarily a bad thing, but it's typically done by the far right folks. So, lastly, from Cpac, let us talk about Bozo Alert number 2 for this idiot we've seen now 2 weeks in a row. And that is Michael Knowles, who is trying to make a name for himself. And, of course, getting the attention he so desperately wants by doing this. And again, this is where the debate of platforming and all that stuff comes back into play. Because technically, even though I have a small audience, but with all the different progressive media talking about this, theoretically, we are platforming this, but to counteract it. This is a type of thing that needs to be counteracted, because if at a the most major conservative conference in the country, you have someone saying what he's about to what I'm about to show you, this needs to be called out. It needs to be mocked, and this guy needs to be mocked. So here we go. This is, of course, once again, right-wingers going after the most marginalized people in this country because they're big, strong guys, but they have to go after the most vulnerable population in the country to make them feel big.
There can be no middle way in dealing with transgenderism. It is all or nothing.
So again, this is the same quote, basically. This is not the same video. This is after he complained about people taking him out of context last week for saying that he's calling for a genocide, which he is. He's saying the exact same phrase again. Transgenderism doesn't exist. There is no ideology called transgender or transgenderism. He is calling for genocide, like quite literally.
If transgenderism is true, if men really can become women, then it's true for everybody of all ages. If transgenderism is false, as it is, if men really can't become women, as they cannot, then it's false for everybody too. And if it's false, then we should not indulge it, especially since that indulgence requires taking away the rights and customs of so many people. If it is...
What rights? What customs? How does any of this affect you? None of it affects you. Smug prick.
False, then for the good of society, and especially for the good of the poor people who have fallen prey to this confusion,
literally, like, the most recent study that I heard was less than 1% of people that detransition. So give me a fucking break.
Transgenderism must be eradicated from public life entirely. The whole preposterous ideology at every level.
So there you have it. all these people, like, look at this woman. Disgusting. You're disgusting. So, once again, calling for the complete eradication of transgenderism in public life. Now, I know that this is, it might sound extreme. It might sound, I mean, we talked about this last week. If you change one word of that sentence, it is so blatantly obvious what you would call that. And it is a genocide. If you replace the word transgenderism with Judaism, it is indistinguishable from Nazism. If you replace that word, that is exactly the rhetoric that led to the Holocaust. I'm not exaggerating. I'm not feigning outrage. This is the type of bullshit that gets people killed. This is the type of bullshit that leads people vulnerable to the rhetoric of these people, because let's be honest, some of the people that do commit these heinous crimes and do, mass shootings are sick. They are inspired by the stochastic terroristic rhetoric of people like Michael Knowles. And now here this is the day after. So this is, that speech is on like Saturday. This is I think Monday on his show, where he's talking about and defending the rhetoric again.
What does it mean then to eradicate transgenderism from public life? And it's a good question. I'm glad people are talking about that. That was the point of my speech. What would it mean to eradicate the preposterous ideology of transgenderism from public life at every level?
You know what? I think he might be onto something. That the ideology of transgenderism is a bit preposterous because it doesn't exist. Transgenderism does not exist. I will keep saying that.
I'll tell you, but first I got to clear the air a little
So
bit.
This is the most insane thing you're about to watch all day. I'm gonna rewind it for a second because I was talking over it. This is 20 seconds into this clip. I'm gonna rewind 12 seconds, okay? This is during his show. You're about to make sure you're sitting down. You're about to watch a guy seamlessly transition from talking about the eradication of transgenderism into an ad. Watch this.
People are talking about that. That was the point of my speech.
Watch this.
What would it mean to eradicate the preposterous ideology of transgenderism from public life at every level? I'll tell you, but first I got to clear the air a little bit. When you want to clear the air, you got to check out Rabbit Air. Go check out Rabbit Air today. Put simply, eradicating transgenderism.
He literally just put in an advertisement out of nowhere. Honestly, a seamless transition. But any brand, which I checked, Rabbit Air is a real brand. Their Twitter is private now their Twitter is, I don't know if it's deleted or it's private or whatnot, because of this guy shoving it into his sentence. He didn't even finish his sentence talking about he wants to eradicate. And then he's like, to clear the air, let's talk about Rabbit Air, which is they're air purifiers. I'm sorry, how stupid do you have to be to shove in an advertisement like that while you're talking about something he doesn't think it's heinous, but it is heinous. Why would you think that an advertiser would want to be a part of this? This is, and also that was like a 5-second ad. Ridiculous.
From public life would mean behaving as American society did before, say, 2015.
So what he's saying here is his ideal is to act like everything was prior to 2015. Now, recall in 2014, 2015, there was the bathroom bill that banned transgender people from utilizing the bathroom that they identified with. Remember, that was in North Carolina. The NBA All-Star game got canceled there and moved, etc. Who started that fight? Because remember, these people want to say and blame people and say transgender people started this fight. And, you know, Matt Walsh, who's the other bigot from the Daily Wire, and I'm not going to play the clip today, but he said, you started this. No, we didn't. Liberals didn't start anything. Transgender people didn't start anything. They just start demanding their basic equal rights. And in the same breath, these people talk about, you know, this clips of Michael Knowles. I don't even know. He might talk about it in this clip, or I'm getting all these clips mixed up because I'm listening to this shit all the time now. Is they believe that feminism is bad. They believe that the acceptance of gay people is bad. They think that it's a mockery and you know, degeneracy of and the degradation of heterosexual marriage and the sanctity of the institution. And they fixate on all this stuff. Now it's transgender people because they need an other. They're afraid of losing all this ground because they're supposed to be the ones that are in charge and they have all the power, but they're just saying arbitrary nonsense. He wants to go back to 2015. 2015? There's been transgender people throughout history, but you're going to say 2015 is the exact date? What, because there was all these anti-feminist people on YouTube? Give me a break. This is ridiculous.
Before around 2015, we did not have any acceptance of transgenderism in public life.
Which is not true.
And it started to be introduced into public life around 2015 when Barack Obama instituted transgender military policies, and some liberals in North Carolina decided to invite men into the women's bathroom and pass all sorts of weird ordinances about bathrooms.
So it actually was the opposite way around, but, you know, of course, that's neither here nor there. So, point of the story here is Michael Knowles is a bigot. He is looking for clout, and people should continue to dunk on him. People should continue to point out the hypocrisies. People should continue to, frankly, look at ways of impacting the bottom line at the Daily Wire. I don't know that there should be sponsorships on, you know, if I was Rapid Air, I wouldn't be exactly happy that my brand was being, you know, shoved into a ad while he's talking about that. So, I mean, even if it's like you were given the benefit of the doubt and saying like, oh, they're just talking about fiscal policy, like they're not. So now you know. Now you know. So as a brand, they should know what they're advertising on. With that being said, let us go to, I want to talk about this. Now, you know what? I'm going to talk about Marianne Williamson first. And then we will talk about Russell Brand quickly to end the program for today. But pulling up the clip for what we talk about later. Okay. Quickly, because I don't think this is going to be that big of a deal, but over the weekend, on Saturday, I believe, Marianne Williamson announced her presidential candidacy for the Democratic nominee of, you know, for president of the United States. And a few people asked me about this, and I've seen a lot of talk on, you know, Twitter. I've seen talk on MSNBC. Well, I don't watch MSNBC, but I've seen the videos from MSNBC. I've seen people debating it, and here's my take. Although everybody has a right to be a part of our democracy. Everybody has a, you know, constitutional right as long as you're a citizen, specifically because you have to be there. There's the rules for to be president. As long as you qualify to those rules, no issue in running for president. Now, is Marianne Williamson more progressive than Joe Biden? Absolutely. Does she support things like Medicare for all? Yes. Does she present a legitimate option for president in 2024? My genuine belief is no. And let's take Biden out of it. In 2020, Marianne Williamson ran in the Democratic primary. Was she one of the more progressive candidates? Yes. Now, I'll say this with a little bit of, it's not necessarily regret, but it's a level of, okay, I understand where I was coming from in 2018, 2019, 2020. And I've grown from experience working within the political system. And that is, I would say 9 out of 10 times, I'm going with the most progressive candidate that I can get. That 1 out of 10 times is based on certain levels of a mishmash of things like electability, electoral experience, governing experience, governing potential. And by governing potential, I mean, if you're elected, what can you do? Although I'm sure Marianne Williamson is a very nice person, although she represents more of the progressive lens, even in 2020, she was not even in my top 3 candidates. So in 2024, there's not exactly any reason to say she should be running against Joe Biden, who, love him or hate him, or you're like me, somewhere in the middle, he's done good things. He's done bad things. He has surpassed expectations in some places, and he has underperformed expectations in other places. But he is the Democratic incumbent. President is different, in my opinion, than maybe Congress or a lower office, which is, 1, easier to primary somebody at with the scale, but also 2, more reasonable. I think you can make an argument to do some of those things where it's logical. Marianne Williamson has some kooky aspects of her personality and whatnot. That's not really my concern. My concern would be, even in isolation, what experience and differing viewpoints do you bring to the table for the presidency? And I think you can even look at the 2 women running for California Senate right now, Barbara Lee and Katie Porter, and argue that either of them would make much better presidential candidates. You could look at Stacey Abrams, who is less progressive than those 2, but still more progressive than Joe Biden by a good stretch. She would be a good presidential option. And again, I don't think anybody at this point should be basically primarying Joe Biden. I know that sounds kind of crazy coming from a progressive, but like, we have to prioritize our time, money, and resources. And let's be honest, I don't think anyone's knocking Joe Biden off, right? So even like literally he would have to, I mean, Gavin Newsom could run. He's not beating Joe Biden. So does she have a right to run? Absolutely. Does she have any chance? No. And that's basically the take. I feel obligated to comment on it as a progressive, and her being loosely in the realm of all the different progressives. Now, again, I don't know how legit she thinks the campaign is versus like what her motives are here. If it's just to move on a certain issue, then that's fine. Go ahead and do it. Now, the last thing we have today is we get to watch some of Bill Maher's program with Russell Brand on it. And I'm not going to show I don't think this is the point where Bernie's on it, but there's a few clips. I just want to show you one, and I want to talk about the false equivalency of certain people like Brand and some nominally on the left that believe in the same concepts. So here's Russell Brand talking to an MSNBC contributor on Bill Maher's program.
It's disingenuous to claim that the biases that are exhibited on Fox News are any different from the biases exhibited on MSNBC. It's difficult to suggest that these corporations operate as anything other than mouthpieces for their affiliate owners in BlackRock and Vanguard. And unless we start to embrace, and also, mate, like just spiritually, if I may use that word in your great country, we have to take responsibility for our own perspective. I've been on that MSNBC, mate. It was propagandist nutcrackery on there. I went on a show called Morning Joe. It was absurd the way they carried on.
Morning Joe.
Remember that Morning Joe's Joe Scarborough, who's a former Republican.
Yes.
Yeah, I don't know what it was. It wasn't morning. There was no one called Joe there. No one could concentrate. They didn't understand the basic tenets of journalism. No one was willing to stick up for genuine American heroes like Edward Snowden. No one was willing to talk about Julian Assange and what he's suffered trying to bring real journalism to the American people. And I think to sit within the castle of MSNBC throwing rocks at Fox News is ludicrous.
My friend,
Make MSNBC better. Make MSNBC great again.
My friend, the moment the
Fight them on a territory you can win on, Joe.
Russell, darling, the moment that you give me a specific example, an actual example.
Okay, I'll give you one.
Just wait. Wait. It's not about bias. It's a false equivalency because you don't actually know anything about any of these organizations you're talking about. Even on MSNBC once. Big fucking deal.
My darling, it was more than enough.
You can't come up with
such a
you
carry-on.
don't have a single actual fact.
Do you want an example? Do you want an example?
Yes.
The ludicrous, outrageous criticisms of Joe.
Whoa, here it comes. Here comes the... So I'm going to pause this right here. I want to say there are legitimate critiques of Fox News, MSNBC, CNN, even with their slants, their corporate biases, as we've talked about on the show. They have biases towards large corporations. They have biases towards their sponsors, etc. Now, Russell Brand is trying to point out all these hypocrisies. He is about to dive in and show his hand as to why he feels this way. And the issue that he is going to raise is COVID. And Russell Brand, who hosts his show on Rumble, which is funded and fueled by Peter Thiel, who is the, if I'm generous, libertarian, if I'm not generous, the far-right billionaire that pushes all this nonsense, that pushes the propaganda and the rhetoric that leads to misinformation, that leads to chaos, that leads to those in power to grabbing more and more power. So, is there a critique of MSNBC? Yes. But is it equivalent to what Fox News is doing? Absolutely not. And we will return to that in a second, but this is the example that he is giving.
Rogan around ivermectin, deliberately.
Ivermectin that has no positive effects with regards to COVID.
Referring to it as a horse medicine when they know it's an effective medicine.
Remember, there are forms of ivermectin for humans. It doesn't treat COVID. But the reason why people called it horse medicine is because there, one, is versions for horses. And two, people were buying the horse version of it, utilizing way too much of it because it was for a horse, and believing that there was this effect when there wasn't.
Rachel Maddow turning up on the TV saying if you take this vaccine, you're not going to get it when it hadn't been clinically trialed for transmission. You have to listen.
There was, again, a very, very small time period and a very, very few days and clips of people saying what he just said. Rachel Maddow saying that you won't get it. Absolutely not. Which, by the way, not to, toot my own horn here, but I've gotten 3 shots and I've never had COVID. So, just saying. Now that there might be other reasons for that, but the vaccine, as they refined it, and as the more and more studies came out, showed that it is safe, it is effective in keeping people, 1, out of the hospital, 2, from being very sick, and 3, most importantly, from dying. It may not prevent people from getting COVID, but it ridiculously reduces the risk associated with getting COVID. And, for that matter, the reason why people also jump on people like Joe Rogan, like Russell Brand, because remember now, also I'll point out that Russell Brand, after this, went on Steven Crowder's program, went on other far-right people's shows. I'm drawing a blank on who exactly it was, but I remember there was at least one. It wasn't PragerU, but it was in that vein. These are right-wing talking points, talking about myocarditis, which, if you don't know, is much more associated with COVID than it is the vaccine. So that is a ridiculous claim, as he's going to continue to make. And I don't know, I'm responding to chat here. I don't know that it's a white rich boy privilege, because 1, I'm not rich, but 2, I don't know that it's a privilege. I just did my duty. I did my duty to my country, and I got my shots, okay? Protecting me and the community at large.
Do you think you can improve America by determinedly and avowedly condemning Fox News without acknowledging that you're participating in the same game? Did you not just listen to Bernie Sanders, someone who plainly, legitimately believes in this country and believes it's possible to change, but is bound by corruption, is bound by the lobbying system?
So that is the end of that clip. But let me just say this. Okay? Bernie Sanders, if you asked him, would never equate the Fox News and MSNBC outlets. Not even close. Bernie Sanders knows the difference. He engages with people on Fox News, and he engages with people that he disagrees with, but he knows the difference. The same thing with folks want to talk about Noam Chomsky and drawing a false equivalency. Because if you actually look at what Noam Chomsky said, he said, and I quote, that the Republican Party is the most dangerous party in the world to human life. That is not me. That is Noam Chomsky. So this equivalency, and Bill Maher pisses the ever-living crap out of me. But if that phrase even makes sense. But people that go around saying that they're progressive, pushing all this stuff, and again, Russell Brand is somebody that, in theory, likes Bernie Sanders. If you cannot see that there is a difference between the Democrats and the Republicans, then you should not be engaging in politics. If you cannot recognize that there is a better vehicle to a progressive outlook in this country, then you should not be engaging in progressive politics. You might as well just be talking about the other stuff in the world. Talk about movies and talk about video games, because politics is about engaging with practicality, and it's engaging with idealistic viewpoints of the world that can be implemented in some fashion, some way, someday, somehow, through hard work, determination, effort. But that's not what people like that are pushing, because ultimately, if you believe that both parties are the same, that leads to nihilism, it leads to cynicism, it leads to the false equivalency, because again, the Democrats are not the same as the Republicans. MSNBC is not MSNBC. Again, I don't watch it. I am not a supporter of it. MSNBC and CNN, for that matter, do not push false, fake, made-up stuff the way that Fox, Newsmax, OAN, Alex Jones, all of them do. So, in the end, that is the ultimate difference right there. But with that being said, thank you so much for watching. We went a little long today, but if you're watching here on YouTube, you can do me a big favor. You can hit the subscribe button down below and hit the thumbs up. It'll help us grow. We're a small channel. We need that engagement to help us reach more folks, grow the progressive movement. You can support the show on patreon.com now for as little as not $5, but $3 a month if you so choose. Or you can do it for more if you like. We have 2 patrons. Let's try to get that up to 10. That's the goal, to get 10 patrons. Patreon.com/Greater Society Media. You can follow the show on Instagram, on TikTok, and on Facebook at Greater Society Media. You can follow me on Twitter at Con O'Hanlon. You can listen to the show on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and anywhere else that you find your podcasts. And you can join the Discord server. Link is in the description box of this video and or podcast. With all that being said, thank you so much for watching. I will see you all next week. Take care. Peace.